Hello, hello, hello.
You know, this guy's a popular guy. I'm reading from ratetheprofessors.com. I'm pretty sure he starts class at 8:20 as a means of torture, but his dry sense of humor certainly makes up for it.
Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
All these people were raving about you on ratemyprofessors.com. You ever looked at that?
No.
They do.
Well, that's great.
But you came here to talk not about yourself.
Absolutely not. I want to analyze the situation,
The news
national,
of the day.
state,
You want to
and
reach
international.
outside yourself.
Are you bubbling in, interrupting this popular professor?
You are. I was looking at all the reviews.
Well, thank you. That's very kind.
President Donald J. Trump.
I noticed yesterday on the Rasmussen poll that he has President Trump at a 50% approval rating now, which is higher than a lot of presidents previous to him. Now, Rasmussen does tend to be biased toward the Republicans. There's no two ways about that. But on the other hand, he can compare it to what his polls showed in the second year, let's say, of the Obama administration. And, it seems to me that's a relevant comparison. So I don't know that President Trump cares much what Ivanka thinks about the media one way or another.
The Rasmussen polls that said 50% approval rating, 49% seem to dislike him. Is that a little bit different than other presidents, the 49%? It does seem like half and half.
I would think that's kind of high, yes. He does have a tendency to make people dislike him, yes. I can't understand it, but yes. But let's get off the Drudge Report and get on to some important items here. That's
okay. As far as President Donald Trump's dealings with Kim Jong-un go, are things a little bit at a standstill at the moment?
Well, it's hard to tell what's happening on terms of diplomatic negotiations and things of that sort. You just can't tell. And the same thing with Iran. Trump has offered to talk to the leaders of Iran, and apparently there's quite a bit of sentiment on the streets in Tehran for doing that. But the Iranian leaders, of course, have rejected that. On the other hand, there may well be some sort of backdoor negotiations going on that we know nothing about.
The only thing I know is that Kim Jong-un sent the White House a letter that the White House says they received on Thursday afternoon in something like the 3 or 4 o'clock hour.
I see.
But the contents of the letter are unknown at this point.
Yeah, well, I expect there's nobody in the White House that can translate Korean at a moment's notice. On the other hand, Kim Jong-un went to Harvard. I expect he can write in English without too much trouble.
The soldiers, the remains of the Korean War vets that were brought back to the U.S.
Right.
Do you attribute that to Trump?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's part of the deal, and I think there's probably, if they calculate, I don't know, maybe 500 remains that the North Koreans have recovered there. And what they sent 50 back, and I assume they'll send them all back. What do they want them for anyway? It's just a gesture of goodwill.
Does that say anything about previous presidents for not getting them back earlier?
It does. It does. I think Trump's point is when you talk to these leaders face to face, you can begin to make some progress in your relations with each other. Now, what else is happening in North Korea? I don't know. I'm sure we know. And so now on the Iranian thing, the interesting point, I think we made the point in our last meeting, did we not, Brian, that the Iranians, Trump is serious when he says he's not going to put up with much more from the Iranians. And then later, on one of the web pages, was a discussion of this top-level intelligence base in, I think, in northern Australia. They have this huge base, manned by the New Zealand, Australia, the Canadians, United Kingdom, and the United States, which has surveillance capability all around the world. And they admitted that the United States had asked them to identify certain targets or certain places in Iran. And the Australians were clear that that doesn't mean we're going to attack these places, but it does mean that the United States asked for our, I guess, the coordinates of these places, maybe ports, research bases, military bases, airfields, things of that sort. So it does indicate, I think, that the United States is serious about bringing Iran into the crosshairs there. Let's hope
The
the
Iranians have had some protests recently, and they were saying down with the dictator. And for that, according to the UK Express, for saying down with the dictator, they got sprayed with tear gas on the streets there.
In Tehran?
Yes.
Yeah, I would think so. No, there's unrest there. And there always has been a certain amount of unrest because the Iranians, a fairly well-developed country. And typically these religious leaders build their support from the rural areas where these people still don't reach or haven't reached the level of education and economic security that Tehran and some of the other larger cities have. So there's definitely the room for some unrest there. And by the way, I must say with regard to the Chinese, it's really quite interesting that the Chinese economy now is beginning to run into some problems. The state-controlled economic organizations have begun to cut back in their indebtedness and other efforts, which is going to affect the private sector in China as well. So you're beginning to see, I think, the effects not only of just basic economic changes, but the coming effects of some hefty tariffs there on the Chinese. I'm hoping that Xi Jinping will be willing to be flexible on some of these trade issues, which I think he will. But the problem with the Chinese economy is that it's very heavily run by the state, and the profit motive there, I think, is the ability to think in terms of profit motive and to think in terms of outside the box, I think is kind of limited. And that's where the United States has it head over heels over places like China.
From what you say and from what I hear on the John Batchelor show,
yes,
it seems like Trump is winning the trade war with China.
Well, I wouldn't. It's hard to say in that respect.
He's
but,
doing better than others.
Well, the United States economy is going nuts. There's no two ways about it. And
going nuts meaning
doing very, very well compared not only to the Chinese but also to the Europeans, the Mexicans, the Canadians. We're just going gangbusters, and a lot of that and you can give some of the credit, I guess, to the tax breaks, but a lot of it is, and Trump mentions this in his speeches, is that the tearing down and abolishing a lot of these agency regulations, which made it very difficult for private industry in a lot of areas to work. It just was another burden, a cost, etc. And the Trump administration has just continued to roll those back, and I think we'll continue to do so. So now, Brian, I thought we might talk a little bit about...
Oh, you want to change the topic at some point here?
I thought we might get on to something interesting.
Go ahead.
Well, I had lunch with John Boehner here Wednesday.
The John Boehner?
Yes, the former
Boehner
speaker,
with a B.
The Speaker of the House. And he's traveling about helping out candidates for Congress.
Is he a lobbyist too, or just?
Yeah, he's also a lobbyist. He's
because a lot of them do that after they get out. Yeah.
Yes. So it was interesting to hear his take on a lot of issues, and of course this was all off the record. I wasn't there by myself. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
There were probably 25 other people in the room, and I just thought his take, and that's why I frankly went up to Rochester to sit in on this. I just wanted to see what his take was on a lot of things. And again, it was off the record, so we won't be discussing some of the points he
That's
made.
the best stuff.
Yeah, well, you're not getting it.
Go ahead.
Well, all right, thanks, Brian. And so I asked him if he thought that Nancy Pelosi would be able to continue as a leader of the Democrats in the House of Representatives. And he pointed out that I think at least 40 Democrat candidates for Congress have already promised that they'll vote against her for a leadership position. But his conclusion was that that you're talking about a 50-50 chance there, that in fact there really wasn't anybody in line to replace her. The candidates, Stoney, let me get that right. The guy from Maryland, who is second in line, is a year older than she is. And Claiborne is about the same age. That means they're all in their late 70s. So below that, Boehner pointed out there's a big gap because the guys that might be qualified to take leadership positions have left Congress. They've run for other offices, they've taken other jobs. So there's a big gap there in terms of age, and then you get down to the younger Democrats. So his conclusion was it's not a sure thing by any means that Nancy Pelosi would be stepping down. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting tidbit.
Yeah, thank you. And then we also talked about whether the Republicans would be able to hold on to the House and the upcoming elections. And his view was that it's going to be tough because historically in the off-term elections, the party in power loses seats. And that could well happen this time as well. But he certainly wasn't saying that it was a sure thing by any means, so that his view, I think, was it could be pretty tight, but the Republicans could well hold on to the House. So there were some points there I thought that were reasonably interesting. Someone asked him whether Trump would actually end up building the wall, getting money for the wall, and Mr. Boehner's view was he would.
He thinks that.
Yes.
And he wouldn't probably be supportive of that, Boehner.
Mr. Boehner's point was that, no, he's definitely supportive of controlling immigration.
Oh, really?
But his view is that you should talk about border security as opposed to just building a wall.
Okay.
And in any case, his view was that, yes, the Republicans will give Trump some money to continue building the wall, and then he said the president will announce that this is the biggest wall in history. And but I guess he's entitled to do that. So I don't think we're going to be looking at a government shutdown here.
Interesting. We're talking with Dr. Bob today, Alfred University political science guy.
Thank you.
Emeritus.
Yes, thank you. You got it right, finally.
We'll be right back.
I really kind of wonder about you, Brian.
You take flooring for granted, don't you? I mean, if you think about how much wear and tear you put that floor through, why would you even think about buying a cheap floor when you need one? Buy quality flooring from Mullen Factory Direct Floor Covering in Almond. Mullins buys in bulk, and that means you save money on quality flooring. They even offer 0% interest for qualified buyers. Shop over 400,000 square feet of major name brand in-stock flooring. And get it installed now. And no box store wait. Mullen Factory Direct Floor Covering in Almond. Let them floor you.
Checking in now with meteorologist Gary Best, who says the rain continues.
That's right. This sticky weather is going to continue for a while longer with high humidity. Brian, some showers and thunderstorms, though we do get a break later on in the weekend. This morning, sunrise was at 6:06. It'll set tonight at 8:27. Not going to see a whole lot of sun today. A lot of clouds, high humidity, scattered showers and thunderstorms near 80. Tonight, showers and storms end. It'll become partly cloudy and 65 overnight. Tomorrow, a blend of clouds and sun, maybe a pop-up shower or thunderstorm, and up near 85. Then fair weather, 65 on Saturday night. Slightly less humid on Sunday with a mix of sun and clouds, about 85 to 90, and sunny and very warm weather likely on Monday, Brian.
Alfred University Professor of Political Science Emeritus Dr. Robert A. Heineman is with us today.
Thank you, Brian.
What's the A for?
That's for Alan.
And like I was saying in the beginning of the show, I was impressed at the rave reviews you got at ratemyprofessors.com.
Thank you.
One of your students said that he was a student of yours during the Nixon years.
Oh, that's
and he was a big fan of yours.
Yeah.
Not Nixon, the student.
Who, what?
That student was a big fan of yours. He said he goes back to 1973 or 4 or something.
Well, that's good to hear. But I think people are probably a little more interested in something more current, Brian.
Like Governor Andrew Cuomo in the race for re-election.
Yes.
You know, Cynthia Nixon puts out a lot of statements. She'll say that the governor is helping the Republicans in the state Senate, that the governor he may compromise with the GOP in the Senate in New York State. But when she says he's helping the Republicans in Congress, I don't know where she gets that.
Yeah, well, I don't know either, Brian, but I do think, again, I think on the show some time ago we made the point that the key primary election coming up on the 13th of September is what?
It's for lieutenant governor.
Thank you, Brian. You're coming
I'm
along.
seeing that prediction is very true. I'm seeing that more and more on EmpireReportNewYork.com since you've said it.
Oh yeah, what?
Yeah, they're talking up that New York City councilman, Jermaine Williams. Your prediction is true.
Well, of course. Yeah, I don't know if it's true, but what are you seeing on Empire State Report?
Well, they just talk about his chances aren't as bad as maybe other outsiders have been, who tried to get in on the lieutenant governorship when they're not on the main ticket with the governor who's in office at that time.
Right. And I thought I saw a poll there somewhere that had Hochul up by 9 points. Now, that's awfully close. And I tried to open that icon there, that heading, but I couldn't get it. So I don't know where that poll comes from. But I did see a poll that had Hochul up quite a ways upstate. But in New York City, she's down. Williams is ahead of her in New York City. And my thought was that the governor might just leave her kind of flapping the wind there and pick up black activists there at the lieutenant governor level. But I do see that he and she have been campaigning together now, or making appearances together in New York City. So Cuomo may stick with her. I think the key point about this lieutenant governor's race, first of all, Williams could well win it. We've made that point.
He's very well spoken. I saw him on Tucker Carlson about a week ago.
I bet he's pretty good. Yes, I've never seen him, but his background in politics in New York City, I think he knows his way around. And the point is, in a race like the one we have up in Rochester between Morelli and this Republican Maxwell, if Williams is on the ticket with the governor, that inner city vote is going to turn out for the Democrats. And Mr. Maxwell's chances, I think, become even less likely. On the other hand, if Hochul ends up on the ticket, there's no real reason for a lot of these inner city voters to turn out to vote, to get them activated. And so I think that somebody like Morelli then has a problem. Not that he won't win. I think he's going to be tough to beat any way you cut it. But the point is that's going to have ripple effects down the ticket around the state. Now, on the other hand, Hochul may well beat him, in which case we'll see what happens. I'm not certain whether he's also on the working families line. If he is, that makes him and Nixon common. But I don't know how that is laid out. But it's definitely a race to watch. That's a point I want to make. And
what would that do to Governor Andrew Cuomo? Pull him more to the left? Let's say Cuomo wins and Williams wins.
They're going to have to sit down and talk to each other a little bit, I think. But I don't think it forces Cuomo much farther. Cuomo could still play, could move to the center, is what I'm saying, and let this guy carry the wild-eyed leftist banners. So it would get even more interesting than it is now.
Good thinking, Dr. Bob. Was there anything I did not bring up that you wanted to?
I probably should begin taking notes before I come in and talk with you, Brian.
Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you.
What?
Did you have any thoughts on the Marjorie Burns story that came out that Marjorie Burns had gotten a check had given a check for $20,000 to the then head of the Livingston County Conservative Party? She says that she gave the check like a month after the endorsement, so it wasn't like, here's the money, here's the endorsement. Bob Lonsberry says that should be the end of it.
Yeah, well, I don't know. First of all, it seems to me you could check that easily enough. I mean, there's a date when the endorsement was given, and there's got to be a date on the check. I don't know, what's the guy's name?
Joe Arrigo, Arnie Rothschild, Jason McGuire.
McGuire, yeah. I don't know if he cashed the check or not. Apparently, he paid it back.
He did give it back, and it did not make its way to Long. It did not go to Michael Long in the Conservative Party.
State Conservative chair. In any case, apparently she has a conservative line, right, in that race?
Yes, if she does not win the primary coming up, she can run as a conservative.
Now, this is something perhaps our listeners should be aware of. Marjorie Burns is running as a Republican, but she could go out and get signatures for the conservative line. But the point is, if she's not a registered conservative, then she's dependent on the state conservative apparatus to okay her being on the conservative line, which they can go ahead and do anyway. So the state party is pretty key in that. The Albany folks are pretty key in that situation. But apparently they've come in and put her on the conservative line. Now, how that worked out, I'm not sure, because I'm sure Tom Cook, who has got a pretty large conservative constituency in Monroe County, might not be happy at all about that, because he tends to be a pretty good friend of Mr. Arrigo's. I don't know what happened there.
We've been talking with Dr. Robert Heineman, who apparently, according to Rate My Professors, didn't use the chalkboard a lot.
No, because you couldn't read anything I wrote up there.
Was that the reason?